Thank you for tuning in to yet another one of my YouTube videos. In today's video, we're going to be talking about everything you need to know before buying a used BMW M car, whether it's a private sale, through a dealer, or even a CPO car. And the great thing about these checks is that it won't only help you make sure that you're getting a great car, you'll also be able to get the price down most likely, and maybe even free maintenance or other free stuff included in the sale of the car. Anyways, this video has 3 parts to it: before the test drive, during the test drive, and after the test drive. And as you may have noticed, everything revolves around the test drive, because if you're going to be spending $50,000, $100,000, or even $150,000 on a used BMW M car, you should probably test drive it first. The first thing we'll want to do is ask the seller for the VIN number, and that can be found under the hood, under the windshield right here, or in the door jamb. Once you have the VIN number, it's a great idea to spend a few extra dollars on a detailed Carfax report to make sure that the car's title is clean, that there's no lien on it, no repossessed title, no rebuilt title, and no collisions on it, because most people want a car with a clean title. I mean, if it's a track build, it might not matter, so it really depends what you're buying the car for, but if it's going to be your regular everyday daily driver or weekend fun toy, you definitely want to make sure it has a clean title. You'll also want to ask the seller for your car's service history, and when you go through this, you're going to want to make sure that the car has had regular oil changes and all the scheduled maintenance that it's needed. So the break-in service and anything else that the car was scheduled in for. You'll also want to make sure that it hasn't had any major jobs done to replace, say, collision damage or maybe a motor replacement. But then again, if this is your track car, a motor replacement might not be a huge red flag for you. One other thing about the service history is that if there are a lot of missed things or improper service, you might be able to get down the price significantly because of the bad service history, or maybe you'll be able to get some free service items replaced. Let's say the rotors are warped, you might be able to get those replaced by the dealer or the seller at no cost to you. All right, now it's time to see the car. But first, there's one thing you want to bring with you, and that is a code reader. Just like the Carfax report, a code reader is a great way to spend a few extra dollars making sure that your car is exactly what you want it to be. All you've got to do is plug this into your OBD2 port, and then magically you can tell if there's any problems with the car because codes will be thrown by the car if there are any issues. You'll also be able to see if any codes in the past have been cleared, which would indicate that the seller is trying to hide a problem. If you're buying an M car, it most likely has a merino leather interior. And if you know anything about M cars, merino leather interiors are extremely fragile. They wear very quickly, especially around the side bolsters and the thigh support, so make sure you pay very special attention to those areas, as well as everywhere else around the interior, because merino leather is quite fragile, so you're going to want to make sure that your interior is in good condition. If it's not, you can use that as negotiating power, or it might be a red flag to the point where you don't want to buy the car anymore. For me personally, I know if my seats were all cracked up, I would not have wanted to buy the car. Okay, I know we've had so many pre-test drive checks, but this is the last one, and I promise. You're going to want to make sure that the car hasn't been running on low oil for an extended period of time, and the way you can do this is by going into My Vehicle, then scrolling down here to Vehicle Status, clicking left on the iDrive, going down here to engine oil level, and then clicking this. It'll take about 30 seconds to a minute, and the car will electronically tell you your engine oil level. On older M cars, you're going to have to do it the traditional way with the dipstick, but either way, if you find out the car has been running on low oil, that may or may not be a deal breaker based on your preference. What I would do though is I would take a sample and get that sent over to a lab, and within 3 days, they'll be able to tell you if any damage has been done to the engine because of the low oil. Since everything's checked out, let's go for a test drive. As you're driving, you're going to want to make sure that when the steering wheel is centered, the car is going straight forward. If the wheel's centered and the car is going slightly to the left or right, then you have an alignment issue, and that's something you have to address before buying the car. Another thing you want to make sure is that the steering is solid and precise, and it doesn't have any weird shaky spots, or it doesn't have any resistance in a specific part of the turn. Change a few lanes, do some turns at different speeds, and make sure that the steering feels the way it should. Since we're talking about steering, don't do this while you're driving, but once you've stopped, go reach down to the left part of the steering column and try the adjustment lever to see if you can adjust the steering wheel. As you're driving, when there's no one behind you, make sure you do a few brake checks to check a couple different things. The first thing you want to check is that the steering wheel doesn't shake when you are under heavy braking, because that would indicate that the rotors are warped, and that is not good for a number of reasons. One, because you're going to have to get it replaced, and two, this means that the car was most likely either poorly maintained or had heavy track use. Another thing you want to check is how the brake pedal feels. If the brake pedal feels mushy, that means that there's most likely air in the brake lines, and again, that is a bad indication because it's either that the car has not been properly maintained or it has had heavy track use. So you want to make sure that the brakes feel firm, and you want to make sure that the steering wheel doesn't shake under heavy braking. Whether you're buying a manual or a DCT-M car, it's a great idea to go through all of the gears and make sure there aren't any weird noises or weird smells like burning clutch as you go through the gears. You should also try the transmission out with regular city driving, so just calm shifting and see how it feels there. And then once the engine is warmed up, you should downshift like this and, do a little bit of this to make sure the transmission works under spirited driving conditions. It's also a great idea to run through all of your sport, comfort, and efficient modes to make sure they're working properly. The last thing you'll want to do on your test drive is roll down the windows a little bit and quiet down the exhaust so you can listen for weird suspension noises, weird steering noises, and any weird smells coming from the car. You just want to make sure that everything is operating as it should. And of course, you got to make sure the car is a lot of fun. Alright, if everything's checked out on your very calm test drive, it's time for you to go through the final steps before you get yourself your new toy. Taking the car to a mechanic you trust is an absolute must, even if the car is coming from a dealer and even if it's a CPO car. I'll explain why later, and it's actually something really important. But before doing that, it's a great idea to do an inspection yourself since it does take time and money to bring the car to your mechanic. Now, I know how tedious it might sound to check the whole car over yourself, but the way I look at it is this. If you have the time to check the car over right now, you might as well take it because one, anything that you find now is better found now than later when you're gonna have to pay for it, and two, anything that you find now can be used in the negotiation to one, get the price down, or two, maybe get the seller to fix the problems instead of you having to pay for them later on down the road. Anyway, here's a list of the most common things you should look at before bringing the car to your mechanic. One of the most important things to check is the paint. The reason I say this is because this car was from a dealer and it's also a CPO car, yet the paint on the front bumper was totally messed up. Something or someone had obviously damaged the paint and it was repainted and re-clear coated, yet the clear coat, it's going to be hard to see on video, but the clear coat has come off in all this area, which I only found out when I got the car wrapped. But had I inspected the paint correctly like I should have when I bought the car with a flashlight and just looked it all over with detail, I would have noticed this at first and it could have been replaced by the dealer, or I could have gotten a lower price on the car. I mentioned it earlier on in the video, but now that we have the car in person right in front of us, we should go over the common problem areas specific to this car while we have the chance. For reference, a common problem with the BMW M2 is that the rear turn signals will start getting moisture collected on the contacts and they will start blinking way faster than they should. So that's something to check when you have time with the car. This is a bit of a weird one, but a great thing to check is the lock and unlock button. And the reason I bring this up is because in my X5 it was actually broken and we got the seller to fix that at their cost. While we're inside the car, we should also check a few other things, that being the hazard lights, which work well. The windows, you want to make sure the ignition has to be on. But anyways, the windows, you want to make sure that they go all the way down, the way up easily, without any problems, without any noises, without any catch-up points or anything like that. You also want to make sure that the sunroof is functioning properly, and you also want to make sure that the power mirrors are functioning as they should. Even though we checked out our brakes earlier on in the test drive, it's a great idea now that we're inside the car to check if the parking brake works as well. What you're going to want to make sure is that the cable feels tight, and that when you pull the handle up, that the parking brake is able to hold the car on a hill. Make sure that the AC and all the other climate controls are working as they should. Also make sure that the radio is working as it should, the infotainment system, and that the Bluetooth connectivity works as it should as well. Basically, check all the electronics that are included in the center stack. A big thing to check is that the seat functions on both sides are working as they should. This includes the bolsters, the adjustments, and the memory seat functions. It's a great idea to make sure that all the lights, including the headlights, the taillights, and the turn signals, work as they should. Even though we tested the brakes for any signs of warping during the test drive, especially any shaking in the steering wheel or anything like that, it's a great idea to do a visual check of how the rotors look, as well as the pads, the calipers, and anything to do with the braking system. It's also a great idea to check the brake fluid to make sure that it's not murky. Another thing that you can possibly get covered for free is tires. If they're under 3 mils or whatever the safety standard is in your province or country, the dealer might replace them for free. In my case, I got one of the tires replaced for free since they were under the safety limit, and I'm sure you could too quite easily, especially if your seller is a dealer. If your car is under warranty, or even if it isn't, it's a great idea to make sure that there haven't been any modifications done on the car. And the reason I bring this up is because my car had warranty. Actually, no, it still does have warranty. And even though it has warranty, the previous owner did a suspension job on the car. I'm guessing he did springs because the rubber boot that protects the coilover was cut. And I never knew this until about a year into my ownership, and when I found this out, I brought it to the dealer, and they didn't want to do it at first, and the replacement cost would have been $1,200, but eventually I got them to do it through warranty, which was very good. But this is something that you should be cautious about, because a lot of the time your dealer won't side with you because they'll say that you have modified the car. Some good places to check for modifications would be the strut towers, the coilover covers, the suspension links, any plastic body panels, and also underneath of any of the bumpers, the side skirts, or the rear diffuser for drilling marks or 3M tape marks. The last thing you're going to want to check is the wiper blades, which are really easy to check. Wow, okay, that was a lot of checks. Anyways, once you're done with all those, it's now time to take it to your trusted mechanic so he can check everything over. Once you get there though, it's a great idea to ask your mechanic to put it up on a hoist so you can look underneath at the suspension, at the body panels, look for any leaks, whether it's oil and coolant, and overall just check for rust and damage underneath of the car. The reason I bring this up is because when I bought my car, again, it was CPO'd, but one of the under trays was severely damaged and I had to replace that at my own cost because warranty wouldn't cover it. So it's definitely a great idea to make sure you get all that stuff checked out while you're there by yourself and your mechanic. Thank you so much for making it to the end of my YouTube video. I really hope you were able to get some value out of this, and if you're buying a used or new BMW M car, I hope these tips have been very helpful to you. I post every Thursday at 9 a.m, so if you enjoyed this week's video, come back next week and there's going to be another one for you to enjoy just as much. Anyways, with that being said, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week.